Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us as we commemorate the life of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. My name is Johnathan Smith. I am the Interim Commissioner at the New York State Division of Human Rights. On Friday, September 18th, 2020, the nation lost a real legend when Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed. There are so many things that could be said about Justice Ginsburg. She was a New Yorker, born and raised in Brooklyn, attending Cornell and Columbia Law School. She was an advocate, founding the ACLU Women's Rights Project, arguing 6 cases before the US Supreme Court, and changing the way that we think about sex discrimination across this country and world. She was a judge and justice, serving on the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, as well as the US Supreme Court for 27 years, the second female justice, and the author of hundreds of opinions throughout her judicial career. And she was an icon, spanning the meme Notorious RBG and inspiring generations of people, young and old, and educating them about the power of the court and the power of the law. This morning, we're going to hear from a number of speakers who are going to speak and touch on each of those aspects of Justice Ginsburg. I also encourage you who are watching, whether on Zoom or social media, to put in chat your own comments and reflections about the justice and share them with our audience as well. Our first speaker is a trailblazer in her own right. New York State Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul has served in that position since 2014, when she was first elected and was re-elected in 2018. Lieutenant Governor Hochul is no stranger to public service. She has served at all levels, from the town board to Congress, where she represented New York's 26th congressional district. Lieutenant Governor Hochul has been a champion for New Yorkers throughout her time. She chairs the Regional Economic Development Councils, which have served to revitalize communities all across the state, and has led the state's efforts to combat the opioid epidemic. Lieutenant Governor Hochul has also been a champion for equality, pushing and championing issues ranging from paid family leave to closing the gender gap. And she proudly serves as Governor Cuomo's eyes and ears, making a point each year to visit each of New York's 62 counties. It is my absolute privilege and pleasure to welcome today the 77th Lieutenant Governor of the great state of New York, Kathy Hochul.
Well, thank you, Johnathan, and to you and to your entire team at the Division of Human Rights. I want to thank you for pulling us together today, because a lot of us have been mourning on our own and just having a lot of reflections about Justice Ginsburg and just trying to figure out how we go forward without her. I mean, it's amazing to think the influence that a woman who was up in years, 87 years old when she passed, but it was almost for all of us, no matter what your age, still seemed, how did we lose her? I mean, we thought she was going to live forever, and certainly we would have loved for her to be here longer, but her illness eventually caught up with her. But as you mentioned, Johnathan, she was New York tough through and through. I mean, we're so proud of her history and what she was able to accomplish coming out of Brooklyn and living a life. You grew up in New York City, you kind of get tough and gritty, and you get knocked around a little bit, and you bounce right back up. And that was really on display throughout her entire life. Her early challenges when she was and this is what impresses me as a mother and a lawyer myself, how she was going to law school, assisting her husband get through his classes when he was sick, raising kids and making it all work out. I mean, just something as simple as that. A role model to me who also had to sacrifice raising kids, trying to practice law, going into a very male-dominated world. I remember being in a big law firm in Washington and being the only woman, the new associate, only woman, and what that felt like. So she is one who got through, had all those same challenges that so many women in law face, particularly if women of her generation, but she just powered right through it. And it was, she went on the charm offensive. She won so many people over to her cause, not just from her intellect, but her sheer force of her personality. And so I take strength from her in many ways. And it's not just when I feel like not working out in the gym and I'm thinking, you know what? She would still be doing this. She would still be out there working out. She never gave me any excuses. I always had to push myself to be stronger because of what she accomplished. But also the lessons from her own life were always on display in her writings, her crisp, clear way to distill an issue down to its essence and to talk about how we cannot have discrimination on account of sex, and to fight anti-Semitism, and to fight gender hostility, and to fight against homophobia and transphobia and so many other areas that I know are the work every day of you, Johnathan, and the work of the Division of Human Rights. What she did in her life as a judge is something all of you do in the agency all the time, and I am grateful for that. But just in terms of her strength and tenacity, and even a year ago, I was with her when she was in Buffalo. She had made a commitment to one of her classmates from back decades ago, a commitment that she would come visit the University of Buffalo. And her classmate passed away the year before, a good friend of mine, but she had kept that commitment to his widow. She went to the University of Buffalo on a Monday after receiving chemo treatments on a Friday, showed up, didn't just stay for a quick tour of the law school or one quick speech. She stayed for 2 straight days, met the faculty, met the students, met the community leaders, met all of us, gave a powerful speech. I mean, she was extraordinary. And I just said, you know what? You can never complain about anything in your life again. I said this to myself because this woman just had chemo. She's got to be exhausted. She sat there and took questions for hours on a stage because she felt she still had more to give. And that is the inspiration that all of us can draw from this. And also, I'll just, as an aside, it inspires me to know that someone who's was a little bit up in years and short. I mean, I'm short, I'm getting older, that she could be an icon, a rock star. My staff all running around wearing her t-shirts with her image on. I mean, to me, that was such a powerful statement that regardless of your age, that there are people watching you, that you can be a source of inspiration to other young people, particularly young women who still are not seeing enough role models in positions of power. And that's why I'm so involved in getting more women to run for office and believe in their own strength and give them confidence. And I know that's what all of you do as we continue to fight to give everyone equal opportunities here in the state of New York. So I know you're going to be hearing some great people. I know Donna Lieberman's on the call. Hello, Donna. We run in front of each other. We see each other in green rooms across the city in different places. And I so admire the work of the ACLU as a former intern for the ACLU back in college. And I truly believe in the cause. And to everyone who's speaking from the Division of Human Rights, I come to my office. I'm here now. This is my cup I drink from, no hate in our state. It's more than a slogan in our state. It's something that you do every single day with your work. And I know what you do, and those of you who have reflections about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her extraordinary life, know that she continues to be an inspiration to the state of New York, the governor, myself, and all of you who carry on the work that you do every single day to make sure that everyone has an equal shot in life. So thanks for this opportunity just to say hello to everyone. And I really appreciate it. And gave me a chance to pause and think about the influence that is going to continue for the rest of my days because of having known the story and knowing her in person. So yes, New York lost a great one, but she will never be forgotten.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Hochul. Thank you for sharing those reflections, for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule to be with us this morning, and for reminding us what an inspiration Justice Ginsburg was. Certainly an inspiration to women all across this country and girls all across this country. I had the privilege of taking my daughter, who's just 6, to a memorial for Justice Ginsburg right when she passed, and to hear how she, even as a young girl, is inspired by the work and the legacy of Justice Ginsburg is so critical and so important. But it's not just women who were inspired by Justice Ginsburg. As the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, really so many people of color, older people, anyone who's ever been excluded, anyone who's ever felt like they didn't fit in, anyone who was ever a first or a second can look to Justice Ginsburg, look at her legacy, and look what she accomplished. And it's not just that she was a powerful lawyer, a skilled advocate, a brilliant litigator. It was also that she was someone who was strategic, who was thoughtful, who knew how to move the world forward, who knew how to make a difference, who knew how to make sure that the legacy that she was leaving was bigger and greater than herself. And that brings us to our next speaker, Donna Lieberman, who is the executive director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, a role she has occupied since 2001. Donna is a longtime civil rights lawyer and advocate, having served as the founder of the NYCLU's Reproductive Rights Project. She also, under her tenure, has grown NYCLU to over 185,000 members across 8 offices and has established NYCLU as a leader in the state and the nation of issues of justice, equality, and fairness. Please join me in welcoming Donna Lieberman.
Thank you so much, Johnathan. I'm pleased to join you, the Lieutenant Governor, and the other panelists and the staff of the Human Rights Division to pay tribute to the Notorious RBG, also known as Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. To call her a trailblazer is an understatement. She was a courageous and determined visionary who could see beyond the reality she was forced to put up with, a reality where women were infantilized, patronized, and excluded from the opportunities in every aspect of life. It didn't matter that she was tops in her class. The meritocracy, the clerkships, the law firm jobs were for men only. For that matter, white men only. But as the world has come to see and admire, RBG never met an injustice that she would take lying down. She always fought to bend that arc of history. She always fought to ensure that we the people included all of us. And like another wonderfully notorious Rutgers Law School alum, she persisted. And she had to be an optimist. Here's how she talked about our country's foundational inequalities. She said, think back to 1787. Who were we the people? They certainly weren't women. They certainly weren't people who were held in bondage. This is the genius of our Constitution, that now over 200 sometimes turbulent years that we have expanded and expanded. Yes, she had to be an optimist. I was a law student at Rutgers Law School while she was there. At that time, there were few women law students. There were only 2 women law school faculty at Rutgers at the time, and only 20 nationwide, 20. There were no women's rights law journals, no courses on women in the law. And she, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, was instrumental in changing all that. No, she wasn't hailed as a rock star back then. She was quiet, very serious, not at all gregarious, but strong, determined, fierce, and brilliant. As a law student at Rutgers, I would pass her office every day, and I still have this image of her. The door to her very tiny office was always open, and I could see her standing over the desk looking through stacks of papers. I'm sure she didn't always stand, but it's the image I remember. I passed her office because it was on this very short corridor on the way to the office of my mentor, who was a rock star, who was recognized as a rock star back then, the civil rights lawyer, Arthur Kenoy. But Professor Ginsburg was just getting started. Her first women in the law class had 10 students, one of whom said in a gathering the other day, she changed my life. She just opened my eyes to a world of possibilities. We didn't just read cases. We read Simone de Beauvoir and Kate Millett. I had no idea. And she wasn't just an aloof professor. She was figuring things out along with the rest of us. At one point, she joined some students in a consciousness-raising group. According to one perhaps apocryphal story, she credited one of her mentees with making her a feminist. Rutgers Law School, also known as the People's Electric Law School, was located in the heart of Newark, and its minority student program made it a magnet for civil rights and anti-war activists in the late 60s who were seeking to use law for the good of the people. It was one of the few law schools with a significant Black student population, and it pioneered the introduction of clinical education and public interest law. One of the Black women in my class who came to Rutgers out of the civil rights movement and for the sole purpose of fighting racial discrimination recounted how Professor Ginsburg changed her life and counseled her, "You will experience both racial discrimination and sex discrimination. And in order to make change, we're going to have to move together and fight both." That same student recounts how helpful that was in understanding that no, it wasn't okay that as a Black female college track star, she couldn't compete in the Penn relays because women weren't allowed. And it wasn't okay that the women's basketball team in her college only got to play half court. And it sure wasn't okay when, as a Black woman lawyer representing a Black defendant in court, the judge referred to her as the defendant's wife. But Professor Ginsburg's vision that the struggle for women's equality and racial equality were inextricably linked, and the collaborative environment she nurtured at Rutgers were the basis for the women's group at the law school to join the Black students in an amicus brief to defend affirmative action. RGB knew the importance of institutional change, and she made sure that when she left Rutgers for the ACLU, her class, the Women's Rights Law Journal that she helped found and for which she was the advisor, continued. And at the ACLU, where I now work and where she's a legend, she founded the Women's Rights Project, crafting the brilliant litigation strategy to achieve inch by inch legal recognition of women's equality. One hallmark of her legal legacy was in choosing plaintiffs. She knew her audience. The bench was a boys' club. So she made the strategic decision to bring some sex discrimination cases on behalf of a man, because a man's story would and did resonate with an all-male bench. To us at the ACLU, she's always been a role model and a source of pride and hope. In fact, she's the only justice to come from an advocacy background since Thurgood Marshall. She may have left the ACLU, but she never went away. She remained personally close to the staff through the years, and she was much loved. She was generous with her thoughtfulness and her moral support, checking in, speaking at functions, even entertaining visitors, particularly kids, to the court. We, all of us, owe her a huge debt of gratitude, and we all take such pride and encouragement that this super serious, super lawyer, and one of our own, could morph into not just the oldest rock star in history, with her own doll, I might add. I mean, how many justices have their own doll? I have a picture of my granddaughter with an RBG doll, which I love. I don't know if it can be shown on the screen, but it's fabulous. Yes, she morphed into the notorious RBG. We will miss her, the country will miss her, and we will carry on the struggle. She would have it no other way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Donna. And we have the picture of your daughter.
Thank you.
Doll. Thank you for sharing that and for serving as a reminder that Justice Ginsburg's legacy started well before her time on the Supreme Court, and that she was an amazing litigator and advocate as a professor and as a litigator with the ACLU. And, you know, there are so many wonderful lawyers in this country, but what really, I think, made Justice Ginsburg stand out was that not only was she a skilled advocate and orator, but she knew how to move the law in ways that are fundamental. The country that we live in today, in terms of equality, is so transformed from when it was when she first started out at Rutgers and at the ACLU. And that's because of her, as you mentioned, incremental approach and her approach of getting buy-in from the time male justices and judges to understand that sex discrimination was real. It was something that not only harmed women, but it harmed all of us. And it made our country less productive, less fair, and less just. For those of us who are lawyers and who have had the privilege of working as a law clerk, we know that there's no relationship, no professional relationship in the law that's quite as special as the relationship between a judge and their clerk. And many of us saw the pictures at the Supreme Court last week where so many of Justice Ginsburg's clerks were able to come back and pay a final tribute to her on the steps of the Supreme Court. And we're privileged today to be joined by one of Justice Ginsburg's clerks, Subhash Iyer, who is a graduate of another great New York school, NYU School of Law, and who currently serves as special counsel at the MTA, and who worked as a clerk for Justice Ginsburg on the Supreme Court in the 2016-2017 term. Subhash, thanks for joining us and for sharing your perspective as a former clerk of the justice.
Of course, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for who is speaking today and who is joining us to remember the life of Justice Ginsburg. I had the honor of a lifetime to clerk for Justice Ginsburg just a few years ago. And what I can assure you is that she was just as delightful in person as her public persona suggested. I had the privilege of seeing up close her commitment to justice, and it was truly awe-inspiring to see her brilliance in action. With her, the clerks didn't have to come up with some brilliant insight. She would handle that. All we had to do, as she would say often, is get it right and keep it tight, which are good things in anything that we pursue. Get it right and keep it tight. She was, above all, as Donna just discussed, a teacher in all respects. It was true to her pre-judicial profession. She strove to teach us, sitting down with each of us whenever we drafted an opinion. She would spend far more time than she ever needed to, explaining each change that she made to our opinions, even when she decided to just rewrite a whole section. She was meticulous, and she was just as much a teacher with respect to the court, both as a litigator and as a justice. First, as a litigator, as we heard, she viewed it as her role to educate an all-male court about the harms caused by sex discrimination. She took the time to understand the justice's perspective and found cases that highlighted why sex discrimination isn't just a women's issue. Like all types of discrimination, discrimination and stereotyping harms us all by artificially limiting people's potential. That insight powered one of her most important opinions as a justice, the one that the justice says that she was most proud of, the decision that allowed women to enter the Virginia Military Academy. That decision highlighted the impacts that sex discrimination has on limiting the potential of all of us. And for that decision, since that decision, countless women have had the opportunity to serve their country and receive a fantastic education from that institution and countless others. Even in dissent, she never lost her patience, gently explaining why her view of the law should carry the day. She was a teacher again. Like when the court made it harder for women to sue for equal pay, she dissented and inspired change through her powerful dissent that spurred Congress to pass the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act in 2009. Over the past few years, she surprised just about everybody when she turned into a pop culture icon, a celebrity for all the right reasons. But for someone who looms larger than life, the justice was always kind, measured, compassionate, and incredibly funny. When we clerked for her, she made sure that she took us out to our fair share of operas, because that was one of her true loves. She would talk to us before a performance about the things to look out for, the key plot points, the most poignant songs. It was education yet again. One Friday during the term, we snuck out of court early and watched a private screening of the movie Loving at a local theater. She celebrated each of our birthdays with a lovely cupcake and Prosecco party in Chambers. And when our kids were born, she would send us an RBG Grand Clerk t-shirt, itching for a chance to spend time with our little ones. We saw her during the 2016-2017 term and energized every time she was in public, and in particular when she was around college and law school students, who she viewed as the future, as the people who are going to continue her struggle for justice. So today I'm honored to have the chance to speak to all of you and to remember the life of a wonderful justice, but just as important, a wonderful human being. So thank you all for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing those personal reflections and reminding us all the ways in which Justice Ginsburg served as a teacher, both to you, her clerks, but also to us as a nation. And she taught us about what our law can be and how we can make sure, both in our legal practice, but also in our personal lives, how we can live lives of integrity and justice and fairness for all people. I now have the privilege of introducing our last speaker, who is actually a former Division of Human Rights employee. Barbara Buono-Cristiano worked at the Division of Human Rights starting in 1990 until she retired in 2015, a 25-year career where she served as our Director of Compliance. But before she joined us at the Division of Human Rights, she spent some time at Columbia Law School, where she got to know a young lawyer and professor named Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But I'll let her tell you that story. So with that, I'll turn it over to Barbara.
Good morning. How do you do, everybody? I made a recent appearance here, which I talked some about meeting Ruth Ginsburg, which was over a phone call. I worked at the business school at the time as an administrative assistant, and she was, I'd never heard of her before. When a phone rang in the student activities office, I was dividing my time actually between working as an administrative assistant and organizing a group of over 300 women to challenge the university's gender discrimination policies. So I picked up the phone one day and this woman just said, "How do you do? I'm Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I wanted to ask you some questions about Columbia because I've just received an invitation to become a full professor of law at the Columbia Business School." And I said, come immediately. Do not pass go, please come. And we talked for quite a while as to the status of women at the university. And she asked extremely pertinent questions. And I told her about the statistical study we were doing of all of the women in all of the ranks of the university. It was an incredible conversation, and I instantly thought, this woman's going to be terrific. And when she came, she was. I don't know whether it was because of Ruth or because the president of the university was trying to co-opt me, but I got invited to be on the Commission on the Status of Women. That's only important because of the interaction that I had with Ruth, who was also on the Commission on the Status of Women. And we had a routine worked out where she would look at cases of new female applicants, predominantly for assistant professorships. And if she saw something that she regarded as a bit flunky, she would get the information to me in a totally legal way. And I would know if it came from her desk, there was something to look at. I'd look at it and, the women in my group would convene and we would find out why it was she picked up on. Took us longer than it took her, of course. And then we would organize some of the women to press the case of the particular candidate. It was relatively easy to do that, and we were actually quite relentless about it. And I do believe that every woman that we pressed the case on got her job at Columbia. During this period, she had this idea that I should go to law school. And I had this idea that I shouldn't go to law school because I knew I was an activist at heart. She had me sit in on her course for a few weeks. And she said, just give it a try. And if you feel more comfortable about it, I'll write, if you don't feel more comfortable about it, I'll write a letter of recommendation for you. Because I also was applying to Donna Shalala's program at Columbia Teachers College. I did the weeks, and the problem was not with the material. The problem was I was in my early 30s by this time. The students were all fresh out of college. I had no interest in discussing at the level at which they were discussing because I had already been through the wars with Ruth and without Ruth. So I finally went up to her and I said, listen, I'm going to go into Donna's program because trust me, I'm not a lawyer. I love reading this stuff, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm meant to do battle on the field all the time. And she said, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but you'll be the one that got away. And, you know, in that case, enjoy, we'll keep in touch. And I said, well, wait a minute. You said you'd write me a recommendation. And she said, you write it, I'll sign it. I said, no, that's not fair. You know, you would write me a better recommendation than I could write for myself. And she just shrugged and smiled and walked away. I wrote my own recommendation. That's how she was. I maintained contact with her. And mostly our contact consisted of back and forth emails. And some of them were very enlightening to me. She turned me on to a program called Due Process. I watched it because I knew she was going to be on. And then, you know, when I told her that I watched it and what I thought of it, she said, I'm glad you thought it was okay. And I actually wrote back, you don't need to respond to this email, but it was way better than okay. Honestly, Ruth, she had that kind of ability, you know. We almost had a little tussle over the film on the basis of sex. And I realized we had the tussle because her nephew wrote the script. And she thought I was saying something negative about him. But it turned out to be quite a good film, especially for anybody interested in the law, because it was incredibly faithful to her life going through that process of being at Cornell and then moving to Harvard and going to Columbia and so on. At the end, I don't know if anybody has seen this movie. I'll bet her clerk saw it. But anyway, at the end of the film, the actor who portrays her walks up the steps in the final scenes to the Supreme Court. And I watched the actor walk up the steps, and then it dissolves to Ruth Bader Ginsburg walking up the steps. So I sent her this note, which I read only because she deserves a touch of humor today. She deserves a touch of humor every day. And the note said, that when I was watching the film, I was aware of the fact that the actor's legs were not as slender as Ruth's were. And she responded, you have a very discerning eye, with an exclamation point. That was Ruth. She could turn on a dime and do something just wonderfully droll and make you love it. I miss her terribly. I actually talk to her when I'm walking around my house as though she could hear me, because after 47 years, it's tough to let go. So it's a pleasure to be with all of you, you Ginsburg lovers, because that's a place I will always belong. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for sharing those personal and touching reflections about Justice Ginsburg, both as an advocate, as a judge, but also as a person. And thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your day to join us this morning. Yeah, I've been looking at all of the really thoughtful and touching comments that we've received on Zoom and Facebook, and they make clear how much Justice Ginsburg has meant to so many people. And as I think a number of people mentioned, the way to honor her legacy is to do what she would have done, which is to keep up the work. And no matter what it is that you care about, no matter what it is that you're passionate about, to continue to do that. But as she says, to do it in a way that other people will join you. And so I encourage us in this moment of sadness and sorrow to also find inspiration in the life and the legacy that she lived and the roadmap of justice that she leaves all of us. And I just want to thank you all again. I want to thank each and every one of our speakers for your thoughtful words and comments and reflections. I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning. I wish you the best. Stay well and stay healthy and take care. Thank you.